Hello, listeners, and welcome to Capture It. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Listen, life is a journey full of moments that provide us with opportunity to capture what it is that helps us grow into the people we truly want to be. Let's talk about these ideal characteristics that inspire and motivate us all, and in time, work to capture it ourselves. Hello, listeners, and welcome to the first episode of Capture It. I'm Joe Traeger, your host. I am so excited to get this thing launched, but I am going to go do something fairly unorthodox, and I actually am not going to be the interviewer of this first episode. I'm actually going to flip the script, and I'm going to introduce you to somebody that is so important in my life, somebody that I could not even venture into this idea of having my own podcast. I got to turn it over to my lovely wife, Emily. Let's say hello. How are you, Emily?
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
So I listen to podcasts myself, and one of my favorite podcasts to listen to is Jay Shetty, and he has a podcast called On Purpose. And I remember listening to his first episode, and he interviewed his wife, and I couldn't get over the idea that if I were to ever do a podcast or partake in the same work, I got to have my wife on. I got to have her be part of the beginning, the part of that journey. And so I'm going to turn these questions over to you, Emily. I know you're going to treat me well, and we're going to try to explain what it is that we're jumping into. We're going to try to explain and give our listeners an idea of what Capture It, the podcast, will be all about.
Alrighty. Are you ready?
I think so. I've been ready for a while.
I'm excited.
I've been gearing up for this for a long time. All right,
Okay.
So first question. Go ahead, Emily.
Alrighty. So, Joe, who are you?
Wow, we are starting with a tough one right off the bat. I guess the easiest way to answer this is, going off of the fact that I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm a impactor, I'm a difference maker, I'm an investor. And when I say I'm an investor, I'm not talking about money and investing money into things. What I'm talking about is I'm an investor in people. I'm an investor in kindness. I'm an investor in love, hope, all those wonderful things that I know makes this world a better place. And I just am eager to make an impact. And I guess as I describe myself and I answer the question of who I am, I really just think to the idea that my life is not about me. My life is about the impact that I can have on other people. So I guess that's kind of how I would answer that one.
Alrighty. Question number 2. You got through the first question. How are you feeling?
I think I did all right. I think we're doing pretty good.
Okay. Why a podcast?
Why a podcast? I've been teaching for 10 years, coaching for 13 plus. And when I thought, as I go through the journey of coaching young people and teaching young people, I've always thought, wow, I wish more people could hear what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so almost as an extension of the classroom, I'm often talking to my students and going through different lessons, and I'm, really always come to thinking like that should be something that everyone hears. That should be something that not only happens just in my classroom, but extended. So the podcast really is a little bit of a way to extend what I do for a living outside my classroom. So, and that's a big part of it. And then the other part of it is I give this assignment at the beginning of every term, and it's called a bucket list. And you're supposed to share your 10 top bucket list items. And I started putting in, one of those items is being a hit podcast. Someday I want to have a hit podcast. And so when I started talking to my students about that, It's been about 3 years, but I still have those same seniors and juniors walking around in the high school. And they're like, when are you starting that podcast? When is it going to happen? Oh, yeah.
They're probably
yeah.
really excited about it.
They remember me sharing that because I would always give an example of that assignment, and I would always connect that to my life. It's a way for me to get to know the students, but also for them to get to know me. I'm a big believer in relationship building. And so I would share true things, like the fact that someday I want to take my mother to Ireland. That's on there. Someday I want to have an 86 square body Chevy.
Can I come to Ireland?
Of course you can. Anybody that wants to go with us, but the whole point will be we're taking Kelly Traeger to Ireland someday.
Alrighty. So it's like your students are holding you accountable for your bucket list.
A little bit.
podcast.
And I think that's just an indicator of how important it is, for me as a teacher, is that you got to build a relationship first, and you got to invest. Again, that's who I am as a person. I invest in the people around me. So that's a big part of it. And so they're always asking, hey, have you started that podcast? Hey, you get that 86 square body Chevy yet? And not yet. That's
his wife won't let him yet.
That's still on the bucket list. But anyways, we're doing this thing. We're doing this thing.
Yes, we are. Alrighty. Question number 3. Why now? You've been teaching for 10 years, so why do you want to start one now?
Well, there's a pretty good story that goes along with this one. We all have those moments in our life that kind of just shine brighter than most, or literally it is life grabbing us by the arm and saying, listen closely. And so there's a story that goes along with this, and it happened this fall. And I always take my leadership students to a leadership conference in Oregon. It's the OASC conference, one of the best conferences that is around there. And they often have these keynote speakers, and they're from all over the nation, some of the top best speakers that you'll ever get to listen to. And this fall we actually listened to Kat Perkins, who is she was a contestant on The Voice. And being a contestant on The Voice is no easy task. And so she actually ended up getting 4th place. And so as we're sitting in this conference, listening to Kat Perkins tell her story about being on The Voice, and her message was about being fearless. And because she had a past in the music industry, and she had a band, and they were doing successful. She tells a story about how she opened up for Bon Jovi, and the music career was going great. And then they found something near her vocal cords that they had to go in and remove. And so, boom, in an instant, her life had taken a path that was not what she thought it was going to be. They ended up having surgery. She ended up losing her voice. Flash forward, she got a job working for this family that she absolutely adored. She is a nanny. And talking about getting her voice back and that journey, and how she thought her music career was over. Well, she found out through email that The Voice would like her to come audition. And through this moment, this second chance, she talks about how afraid she was. And it was her 9-year-old nanny daughter, if you will, so that this family, the daughter within that family, this 9-year-old girl that says, why not? And listening to her tell that story, and when she got to that moment where this 9-year-old girl is saying, why not? Why not just go audition? Why not go do it? I kind of had a moment sitting there, and I said, you know what? Why the heck not? And so that's where we're at. I said, I'm going to start taking the steps to figure out how to podcast, to figure out what is involved, which there's a lot more to it than I thought. So I've been researching like crazy, getting to know everything I can. But it was as simple, as the question, why not? And so I'm so glad I was sitting in that conference. And I'm so glad I heard a message about being fearless. And I'm glad Kat Perkins was there to grab my attention. And that's what I needed. And so it was really just a question of why not? And kind of like, hey, let's go. Start now. So that's why now.
That's awesome. Do you know if she has a podcast of her own that she tells that story to?
I don't know. I don't think she does have a podcast. She has an Instagram, and I follow her on her Instagram. And she does a lot of traveling. I think part of her journey has really become going to conferences, going and speaking and telling her story and promoting this idea of being fearless. And so that's been a cool part to hearing her.
That's awesome. Alrighty. Where did Capture It come from?
Well, the whole intent with naming this podcast was coming up with some words or a word or some type of title that meant more than just a title. So I didn't want to call it the Joe Traeger Show. I didn't want to call it, just something podcast. I really wanted it to mean something, and I really wanted whatever word it was or concept or phrase to really act as these umbrellas, these ideas, these concepts to have conversations under. And so as I begun the journey of number one, deciding I was going to do this, and then deciding what it was going to stand for and what it was going to be about. And so as I'm going through that thought process, I found myself thinking about words and what words could I use and what could the letters stand for I was laying on the couch one day, watching TV, and I don't even remember who was on, and I was just like, wow, that person has truly captured something, and I was like, that's it. I was like, we should call it Capture It, and we should call it, this idea that we want to go capture these ideas and these concepts ourselves. And so as I landed on that word, and it kind of just came to me, I was like, okay, well, now what would it mean? What would it stand for? And so the letters do stand for different things, and again, it's inside this concept of having these umbrellas to hold conversations under, and bringing things to the table that, as we live through our life, working to capture these ideal characteristics that we know inspire people, that we know people appreciate and they admire, and talk is cheap. Living a life, and one of the most important things that I talk about in my leadership program at school is that leadership is not title. Leadership is not the words that we say. Leadership is action. And so as I roll into this venture of creating a podcast that maybe people will listen to and maybe they'll take something away, I want to talk about things that they can capture in their life and things that they can use and behave in a certain way and make habit in their life a certain way that will, in the end of it all, make them a better person. Because that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do as an individual. I am not perfect in any way. I do not know everything. I do not, I'm not this walking mass of knowledge and wisdom. I'm working on it. I'm working on life. I'm working on these things. And as I'm trying to get better at these things, maybe if we have conversations around it, and maybe if we talk to people who have captured these things in life, these ideals that we love and appreciate, maybe they can show us the way. Maybe they can show me the way. Maybe they can show you the way. And so that's where the title has come from. And I really think that as I've mulled it over, and as I've been searching for a title of this podcast, that is something I have landed on, and it has just drilled a hole straight to the core of my heart, because what it stands for is what I believe in. And so that's the exciting part, is that there's some passion behind this. There's some things that fire me up. It's a cause I believe in, and so we're going to work to capture it.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that it was an acronym. So what does Capture It stand for? What do the letters stand for?
Well, the C stands for courage. Then we got attitude, perspective, truth, uniqueness, recognition, and that's kind of my form of gratitude. We'll talk about that, and empathy. And so when we're talking about courage, I think people get courage. I think they understand what courage is. It's really about facing fears, doing what is uncomfortable. And really, if you know anything about growth, if you know anything about success, you got to step outside your comfort zone and really challenge who you are, challenge what you're capable of, or you will never know. So that whole idea of getting used to being uncomfortable.
And
Courage.
that goes for high school students, but also adults.
Well, the more I think about this, the more I think this podcast is, it's like I think the conversations that I have with ninth graders are great conversations to have with anybody. And what's good for a ninth grader to hear is a good reminder for any adult living in this
Yes.
world. And so facing fears, courage is definitely contagious. And so, we hear these stories, we can share these stories, but that courage, I think, is a huge topic to speak to. And I think it's one of the easier topics. Then we talk about attitude. And attitude very much so coincides with like just choosing it. We can consciously choose our attitude at any moment in the day and re-choose and keep choosing. And so attitude has a lot to do with mindset, has a lot to do with thought control. And so being able to speak to attitude, I think, is one of those very important things. The P stands for perspective, gaining perspective in this world and gaining understanding and knowledge about how this world works is something that I think we need to always be working on. And there's a lot of humility in that too. It's like, competency versus humility. At the end of the day, we're not going to get a certificate that says, "Oh, here you go. You know it all. You know enough." I don't think that's the way we should live. I think we should live a journey of always getting to know as much as we can about how this world works. And because if we can do that, then in my service mindedness is we can help others. Truth is what the T stands for. I'm a huge believer in being a truth seeker. Being a truth seeker is all about being able to understand your truth, why you are who you are, how you came to be that person, and that is very much so connected with our experiences, our backgrounds, our stories. And I think truth and living truth versus hard truth. And, hard truth is like, it's hard to argue gravity. If I throw something up, it's going to come down. It's hard to argue those things that we know, like the world is not flat. Those are hard truths, but living truth it's much so we are not things and stuff. We are human beings and we are complex. And so when we talk to truth, it's more so it's like, tell me your story, tell me your truth, because I have my truth. And if I take that as the only thing that matters, we always talk about ego in leadership being a very dangerous thing. And so seeking stories and seeking truth is a huge factor. The U stands for uniqueness. And I think that's just a celebration of our true authentic self. I'd love to talk to people about, who they are, why they are, what makes them who they are. And I think that sharing those stories and people sharing who they are, and again, we're looking at characteristics that we think ideal. And if they share a certain characteristic that inspires us and motivates us and we appreciate about them, then let's talk about how they do that, how they encompass that in their life. And then I don't think we can have conversations about leadership. I don't think we can have conversations about bettering ourselves as human beings without talking about empathy.
Yes.
It is one of the most important factors for us as growing teenagers. If I'm talking about my students or any adult, I mean, empathy is huge. And so I have a feeling we'll be talking about that a lot and seeing ourselves in others. I think that's one of the best things we can do. So what do you think about all that?
I love that. That's awesome. I love that each letter stands for something, and it's, like you said, an umbrella of a bigger
yeah, and it doesn't, it definitely doesn't cover everything. I mean, there are things, and I even said service-mindedness. Well, there's no S in capture, right? But service-mindedness is a huge thing that I believe in, and that's a characteristic I've taken from my family. And again, we'll probably share those stories down the road, but they act as umbrellas. And yes. I think service-mindedness, that's an attitude that we can choose. I can choose to put others before me and really start practicing that and making it a habit in my life. And so these are umbrellas that will hold conversations under, connect things to.
I love that it's not just a tunnel vision. I like that you can really talk about anything within Capture It.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea, is that through our stories, through talking about some of these important factors of life, I think, again, it gives people the opportunity to ponder, to wonder, to think about how they might incorporate whatever it is we're talking about into their life.
So what about the IT in Capture It? What does the IT stand for?
Capture It. I had to have a reminder. I had to have a reminder that these are all things that we're working on in time. So the IT stands for in time, and I briefly talked about that humility factor, right? It's like life is a journey. I mean, we're never done. It's funny because you're growing up, and when you're little, you think, oh, I'm almost done with middle school, and then I'll be done, or I'm almost done with high school, and then I'll be done, or college, or whatever it is. And I'm finding, as I get older, there's no done. You just keep working. You just keep working at being the best you that you're capable of becoming. And so the IT stands for in time, because in time we should always be working on these things and fine-tuning them. I consider myself to be a kind individual, but I always need to be continuously working to be as kind as I possibly can. And in the last few years, I've really taken some of those ideas, those concepts, and truly be thoughtful in my working on it. So that in time is kind of like a watch, right? And so a lot of the stuff that I'll put out on Instagram or whatnot, it'll have gears on it. And so that's like, again, that visual reminder that, oh, it's like gears in a watch. Oh, it's in time. We should always be working on these things. And we all know as human beings, we are so not perfect. And so we got to continuously work on it.
So you thought about that all by yourself, huh?
Wow,
I'm
not a very smart guy, but I have moments, and that was a moment that simply, it came to me. I was like, capture it, like, if I saw something that was inspirational in somebody else, capture it, and how could I talk to them, or hear their story, or see how they live their life, and capture it myself. So yeah, it just kind of came to me like that.
Have you talked to your high school leadership kids about Capture and what it stands for, or do they know anything about the podcast?
Only a little bit. I came up with the idea, and I found the slogan that I wanted to use, and using Capture It, and then I started to have some conversation with some of my kids, and I said, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, you got to do it. They're like, that's so perfect. You got to do it. And so I created an Instagram that went along, and just kind of through word of mouth, the Instagram started taking off a little bit. Within a few days, within a week or so, it jumped to 200 followers, just by kids getting excited about it, and just me telling and bouncing the ideas off around somebody, as I come across people that I wanted to share this idea with. And here we are. It's going.
We're rolling.
It's moving. So yeah, I think the kids are excited about it. I think people that I talk to are excited about it, and
I'm excited about it. Okay, so when you use your logo and title, it is lowercase. Why is it lowercase?
You noticed that?
I did.
You noticed that. People actually noticed that as well, and they're like, well, why did you do it that way? I said, when I was designing the logo, and actually, I had some students helping me with this, and so that's the cool part about it. It's like having this dream and people dreaming along with you is a really special thing.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about it, and I was like, it's got to be all lowercase. And it's just a point of being like, what I have to say and what I think is not necessarily the most important thing. And so, like, all ego aside, it being lowercase and seeing it in lowercase is just that idea that it's not any more important than anyone else's ideas or anyone else as we go through this journey. So it is lowercase for a reason.
Okay.
And that means
it's not just a typo or anything.
It's not a typo.
Okay.
It's for a reminder that no one person is more important than the next.
I love that. That's awesome. What can the listeners expect from episode to episode when listening?
I love having conversations with people. I feed off of having conversations with people. So it's going to hopefully be a way that we can have conversations with people that are bringing these ideal characteristics into their life, having conversations around it. There'll be times that I bring in some ideas and some wonderings that I have myself. And I'll be talking about, courage, perspective, attitude, empathy. I'll be talking about all these different umbrellas as well. And so I'll share some ideas, some thoughts, some things that I stumble across, along as I'm hoping to have some guests and some co-hosts to help talk through some of these things.
And you should have some Q&As, question and answers from fans and listeners.
I would love to, and I will. I mean, we already have an Instagram going, and that'll be a mainstream line of communication to ask what listeners want to hear, to ask ideas from them, and then also for a way to just keep that connection going, not only listening to the podcast, hearing the podcast, putting the podcast together, but also being out in the social media presence as well.
The intro music, how did you land that? What, did that just come to you too when you were
Do
sitting
you like
on the couch?
the intro
I love
music?
it, yes.
You do? Okay,
It's jolly.
It is pretty jolly, but it was when I started looking for possible intro music, I stumbled across that one, and my heart just started jumping out of my chest. Because it's so me. It's so fun. It's so energetic. It's enthusiastic. And so then the other part to it is, I'm from a small little farming town, the greatest place in the world, one of the greatest places in the world, Mount Angel, Oregon. Small little German community down there. And they host the Oktoberfest every year. It's one of the largest in the
If you
United
haven't
States.
gone, you need to go. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Usually happens in September, so put it on your calendars. But I'm from a small little country town. Country music is my soul, right? And so when I heard the intro music and how it had a little banjo, I was just like, done. That's it. So I've been using it. I hope it doesn't annoy anybody, but that's the Joe Traeger country flair hitting up right there.
Do you use it in your classroom, like at the beginning of the school day or each period? Each class period, do you put it on?
I often am playing music as students enter my room. I always often try to greet them at the door and say hello, make eye contact and smile. That goes a long way with building relationships in the classroom. And so I'm often playing music, but I'm not that coordinated where I had my podcast intro music rolling as we go into the classroom.
Maybe eventually.
Yeah, maybe eventually. But this is also, as much as I love teaching in the educational world and the coaching world, this will be a little bit separated from that. It'll be a way to just have conversations at a very human level. I don't want it to be all about education.
Yeah.
Naturally, I'll probably lean on that because that's who I am and that's what I know.
Yeah, most definitely.
But when I'm talking to people that aren't in the educational world, it'll probably go all over the place. So that's another exciting part to that. You ask me where this thing is going from episode to episode. I don't know, but that's part that excites me a lot.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's all for the questions. I don't think I have any more.
Okay, well, I am going to jump back in as the lead here, and you'll find me talking about gratitude a lot. One of my key umbrellas in this whole capture it idea is recognition. And recognition being really how I have a conversation around gratitude. And so I often ask the question, who in your life is worthy of gratitude? Who in your life is worthy of recognition right now? Or what in your life is worthy of some recognition right now? So I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna ask you this question, Emily Traeger. What or who in your life is worthy of some gratitude or recognition?
Oh, I have a lot of people in my life that are worthy of gratitude, and I think we'd be here all night if I had to name them all and just pick one. So I went with my health. There are kids and adults that are fighting for their lives every day, And I'm thankful enough that I am not fighting for my life every day, and my loved ones are not ill in the hospital fighting for their lives. So we do fight every day as humans, but I'm not ill. My husband's not ill. Friends and family close to me are not ill, so I'm very grateful for my health and the health of the ones I love around me.
I think health is one of those things we often overlook, and we can get so caught up in our life and what's going on from the day to day that we forget to stop and say, you know what? I am thankful for the air in my lungs and the fact that I'm not fighting right now to keep through my day. And so that's a great point to bring up. I'm gonna bring a moment of gratitude as well.
Yeah, what's your gratitude?
I gotta simply thank you.
Oh, thank you,
Emily. I could not be embarking on this dream of creating this podcast without your approval and without your enthusiasm around it. And so I just want to thank you for kicking this thing off with me. I couldn't think of a better person to have on the first episode ever.
It's been fun.
Well,
I'm loving this.
And I kind of like that maybe now I got a built-in co-host whenever I need one.
Yes.
So that's a great part too.
I'm yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So let the journey begin. This is Capture It, episode 1. Hope you enjoyed. As we get going here, feel free to follow us on our Instagram. It's captueit.joe. Is the handle. And then also, as you're listening to the podcast, you want to subscribe, rate, and review. Emily Traeger, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I love you, baby.
Love
and
you.
And we'll see you right after this, because we're going to hit the record button off and probably hang out.
Watch some TV.
Sit on the couch, cuddle up, and watch some tube. We would like to thank our sponsor, Damas Painting and Construction, for all your exterior and interior painting needs. If you live in the Portland metro area, make sure you give them a call, 503-332-3573.